I am a professor at the College of St. Rose here in Albany, and I teach in the clinical mental health counseling program. And actually, one of the questions that we ask our students that are coming into the program, we just did interviews last week, is that, can you tell me about a time in your life when you advocated for someone? And some people sort of look up and they're like, they can't think of a time in their lives. And other people, they sort of brighten up and you see their face lights up and they got this wonderful story of being able to be helpful to someone. And in so many ways, that's exactly what we do with families. And we talk about the importance of families. And I love this group and the fact that how you got together and what you stand for here. And it's an honor to be here to talk to you guys today. You know, as I'm getting ready here today, your name, sir? Jarrell. Jarrell, what's the first thing you notice about me, Dr. Bird? I just kind of see if you know, I know it's early in the morning, but I want to check with you, see how your senses are working here, how observant you are. Jarrell, what's the first thing you notice about me? I got a tie on, okay? Actually, I appreciate Jarrell's answer here. I speak at schools all over the country, actually. And what's really funny is I'll sometimes walk into middle schools, and all these kids are sitting in this big auditorium, and I'll usually pick some kid in the front row, and I'll say, what's the first thing you notice about me, Dr. Bird? And of course, this poor kid starts to turn red. And not unlike Jarrell, they lie for a while. And because they, you know, and the kids are so wonderful because they're just trying to be polite, you know, and they say, well, I notice you're wearing a tie. I notice you're wearing a suit, you know. I notice you have gray whiskers. I notice, you know, and it's really, but when I go to elementary schools, and I have like 300 kids in a gymnasium, and I'll say, I'm going to call on somebody that raises their hand. Can somebody tell me what's the first thing you notice about Dr. Bird? And about 300 hands go in the air, you know. And it's usually some distractible kid that reminds me of myself. He's going, oh, and he just can't wait. He's got to get the answer out. You're short! You're short! You know, and he's got to scream it out. And obviously, you know, the very first thing that you notice about me, but I love like middle school kids and high school kids and even college students that I speak to all the time. They're trying to be polite and not say the very obvious thing. But you know, what I always tell the kids too, I said, look, if somebody came walking through that door right now and they were 9 feet tall, everybody in here would turn and look. We'd go, whoa, dude, he's 9 feet tall. And we would look, but what I say is that we wouldn't look out of disrespect. We notice differences. And there is nothing in the world wrong with noticing differences. And I also say there's nothing in the world wrong with feeling like you're different from everybody else around you. And you know, you'd be surprised, like I'll have an auditorium full of middle school kids and I'll say, how many of you have ever felt really different than everybody else around you? And half of the audience will raise their hand and I'll say, look, if you have that feeling like I feel different than everybody else around me, I say one day you're going to find out that's the best thing that ever happened to you. And me being short, I love being short, and it's really funny because kids will run up to me in the store like they just discovered America. Mommy, look at the little man. And they're so excited. They discovered the little man in the cereal aisle, you know. And I love their honesty. And that's okay. But I have a lot of fun with it. I have a lot of fun with my height. And because I'm always joking about it and stuff. And a little boy was standing next to me in line at a grocery store, and he just kept staring and staring and staring. He says, you're short. And I said, yes, I am. Do you like it? And I said, well, yeah, actually, I do like it. And they said, why? And so I said, okay, well, because I can almost stand up in a minivan, and I can, yes. Well, when you sit down to eat, the food is much closer to your mouth, so you get a lot quicker. But the best thing is when it rains, you're the last one to get wet. But and actually, all of my clothes are half price because I get them at the boys department of Walmart. But I was at a school last year, actually, up here in Clifton Park. And I walked in, I met the principal, and I was walking down the hall, and I was meeting a whole bunch of teachers. And so I ran back to the office, and I hand my phone to the principal, and I said, please, come down here. There's a bulletin board. I said, I want you to take a picture of me next to that bulletin board that you guys made in my honor. And she's looking at me with this blank look on her face. Picture, bulletin board in your honor. She has no idea what I'm talking about. So we come down around the corner, and I I give her my camera and I jump in front of the bulletin board, and she's standing there with my camera and she's thinking, is he serious? Is he... One of my favorite quotes, though, Dr. Seuss there, that says, I will share with you that, trying to see my computer, thanks, that not all of us are the exact same persons now as we were when we were children. A couple of years ago, my father had passed away out in Colorado, and I'd gone to my mother's house, and she had all these old pictures. This is actually one of them. And I always wore suspenders as a kid because I was so tiny, I had to have all my pants cut off, and the belt wouldn't hold the pants. I'd just fall off of me, so I wore suspenders everywhere I went. But I was that kid who drove every teacher insane. And I'm so glad I was not raised in this day and age, because they would have needed a whole team of psychiatrists from Vienna just for my IEP. I was distractible, I was hyperactive, and so my mother, though, what I didn't know, that my mother and father had this trunk in the basement. I was helping my mother clean out the house because she had to move to another facility, and my father had passed away in his late 80s, and he had a wonderful, rich life. He was in the Navy in World War II. He had a great life, and so we were at the house, though, and we were helping my mom clean out the house, and I find this trunk, and it's full of children's classwork. Okay, and there was these big files with, I have 2 older brothers, 2 younger sisters, so I start going through the files. I find my sister's files, and it's like A+, 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 B, A+, all these beautiful glittery pictures and all this kind of stuff. I find my older brother's files, A+, A. My mother saved all of our best work. So I find my file. Okay, I'm going to, in case you're just wondering, and this is one of my older brothers. And so you can see, look at the work there. Oh my goodness, it's so neat. And it says, very excellent. The teacher writes at the top, very excellent. And so that's my older brother, one of my older brothers. I blotted out his name so you can't see it. I find my file, though. Okay, I'm going to show you, in case you're wondering, how did little Stevie Birchak do in school? I'm going to show you the top 3 papers that came right out of my file. All right, this is the truth. These are the top 3 papers that came out of my file. We have F, and we have F, and we have F. And as I go through this file, it's one after another, after another, after another. And I said to my mom, I said, why did you keep these? And she said, that's all we had. And so, and I was that kid that frustrated everybody in my school. All the teachers, my wife said, if you weren't so cute, they probably would have strangled you. Because, they said, oh, he tests out okay, and he tests out okay. But then why does he do this kind of work? And, of course, being attention deficit and very, very, very distractible, which I am to this day. I teach at the college, and I'll go off on tangents because I'm not paying attention to what direction I'm going. I'm very distractible. And if you handed me a worksheet in school, I just wanted to get it done as quick as possible. I didn't care what grade I got on it, so hence that's what I got there. I think my favorite, though, is the one that's right in the middle, because you can see, to further humiliate children, one of the techniques was to have them hand their paper to their partner next to them and have their partner grade it for them. And I remember this class really well because his name was Mr. Cutler. He never left his desk. He sat behind the desk, and he was like all military, had this crew cut haircut, and he never left his desk. A student would hand out the sheets, and then they would gather the sheets as well. But he was so lazy, he didn't even want to write down your grade in his grade book. You'd have to shout out your grade, whatever you got in the class. And so he had to do it military style. So it was like if you got an A, it was Abel or Baker for B or Charlie for C. And instead of Delta for D, he'd have you yell out doggy because you were in the doghouse, according to Mr. Cutler. And so I remember my little buddy Anthony, though, every single day of elementary school, he really struggled with math. And he said, I hate that class. I hate that class. I hate that class so much. Because they would get to Anthony, and he was, Anthony, doggy. Anthony, doggy. Anthony, speak up. What did you get on that? And I remember my poor little friend would finally have to speak up loud to tell everybody in the class that he got a D. And I remember how hard that was on him. Of course, you're not going to mess with little Stevie's ego. When they get to me, Stevie, Foxtrot, It's like... We're going to the office again. And I remember that over and over and over. And of course, that was my life as I grew up. And it was so funny because I used to get these report cards, and I would hear teachers who would say, we're very concerned with Stevie. He needs to apply himself. You know, I teach educational psychology. I have no idea what that even means. You know, apply. If he would just apply himself. I have no idea what that means, but it was on every one of my report cards. We need parent conferences again and again and again. He's a class clown, and he needs more detention. I serve more detention than any other kid in the school, I'm telling you. And he may be unsafe because Mrs. Breffel wants to strangle him. And so I remember this very well, time after time after time. So if you've got attention deficit kids in your life, give them a break, you know, because they, but you know, what I say is that, here's the other thing that what my parents were once told by a principal, you know, must be sparing the rod and spoiling him, make that kid settle down in class. And of course, that was my whole life. But you know what it was, is even when I went off to college, back in the day, we didn't really understand what it meant to have attention deficit, and I nearly flunked out of my undergrad because I didn't know how to take notes. My father had an 8th grade education, and I was the first of 5 kids to go off to college, and I didn't know how to take notes. I didn't know how to memorize things for exams. I didn't know how to read so that I had good comprehension. Once I figured it out, you know, on my own, by the time I got to my master's and my doctorate, I got straight A's. But there was nothing wrong with me, but along the way, everybody kept saying that something about him being disordered, you know, being disordered. And, you know, and some of you may already know this, though, but do you know how we plan for the number of prison cells we're going to need in the future? Any of you know how we do that? Like 20 years from now, they're figuring out how many prison cells we're going to need. They actually study the data of 3rd and 4th graders. And from that information, they make predictions, like for 2 decades from now. And you know, I don't know if you're like me, but the first time I heard that, I was appalled. I was like, wait a minute, what? You're telling me you're going to study the data of children in 3rd and 4th grade, and you're going to accurately predict the number of prison cells in 2 decades? Shouldn't we be doing something else with that information? I'm sure that they were taking my information, and they had a prison cell in Sing Sing with my name on it, but it wasn't a very good, accurate prediction. What we need is, why don't we take that information, that data, and say, why don't we create interventions? Which is why, you know, I teach a lifespan development class, and I talk a little bit about, you know, the fact that, and I have a problem, and I can go off on a tangent a little bit, but sometimes when we talk about what's disorder, it's not really disorder at all. I don't think of myself as disordered, but this is the condition of the way my brain works. I am not disordered. If you can get a doctorate and write 5 books, there's nothing wrong with my brain, but it works different than other people. And so my ability to pay attention and things like that. And so sometimes I think that, you know, I think that we go off on a tangent way too much. And, but anyway, what's my assessment right now in 2017? Well, I'm still attention deficit, and I'm just a reform class clown in remission. So anyway, you know, all of us are on a journey in life. And one of the things that I write about quite often in one of the books that I've written called How to Build a Child's Character by Tapping Into Your Own. You know, when I was going to name the book, we were struggling with the title, and my wife said, well, what's it all about? And I said, it's about building character by tapping into your own. She said, well, that's the name of the title. You've got to tap into your own if you want to build it in others. In other words, like the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, she says, it's not fair to ask of others what we're not willing to do ourselves. And I think for all of us, we're on a lifelong struggle sort of to continually refine ourselves. It isn't like you find a set of life skills and then all of a sudden you're there. You're on the mountaintop and forever I'm going to have perfect well-being. But no, it's like every step of life is going to be some kind of a new struggle. It doesn't, whatever skills it took you to survive kindergarten, you needed a whole new set of skills when you got to 1st grade, and when you got to 7th grade, when you got to high school, when, you know, so all the way through life. And now I'm in my 60s and I'm going, wait a minute, you know, nobody told me about all this arthritis stuff. And, you know, you have to readjust to everything that life throws at you. But what I hear from people very often, that they'll, when we start to talk about happiness, and I talk about happiness a lot because happiness and the quest for joy in our lives, that's what life is all about. I'll hear people say, as soon as. As soon as I get a new job, as soon as I have more money, as soon as I get a new car, as soon as my boss drops dead, and then I'll be happy. As opposed to saying, like, right here, right now, I've got everything I need to be happy. And all we have to do is sometimes just look at the circumstances of our life, because it isn't an as soon as thing. And I think one of the other things that I talk an awful lot about, and actually right before I got started, Lynn is out here somewhere. She said, she remembered something she's heard me speak a few years ago that really stuck with her. And she said, it's not a crisis, it's an inconvenience. It's not a crisis, it's an inconvenience. All of us really need to de-escalate ourselves in this world. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is we cannot build anything in any of our fellow human beings until we all just de-escalate a little bit. Just turn it down a notch, not get so excited, not get so aggressive, not get so hostile. Think about this, guys. We're using terms right now that didn't even exist 2 or 3 decades ago. Road rage, right? Road rage. That term did not exist until a couple of decades ago. Road rage. We had to invent it for all the knuckleheads on the highway. Road rage. And now we have Twitter rage and shopping rage and email rage and Facebook rage. And I keep asking myself, where's all of this rage coming from? And it gets kind of sneaky as well. I think aggression is a very sneaky thing. When a couple of 5-year-olds are standing in line and one of them jumps in front of the other, they start smacking each other, go, hey, you kids, be nice to each other. You're ugly. You're uglier. You're ugliest. And so then we go over and we say, now you kids should learn how to speak nicely to each other. See, then they take that next step. There's actually a book written by John Lee. He calls this soft rage, where you use sarcasm, and the little kids start going, nice dress, did you wear that yesterday? And where do you think they learned that? They learned how to use a sweet voice and still hurt their fellow human being. They learned that. And so aggression gets really sneaky. Have you ever been around somebody and you say, I just can't put my finger on it, but every time I'm around Bob or Phil or whatever, I just feel really stressed. It's because aggression gets sneaky as we get older, and we do things like sarcasm, as well as what's called soft rage. Any of you ever give your loved one a silent treatment? I had a woman in one of my classes, she says, sometimes I won't talk to my husband for 2 weeks. Well, not to overquote Dr. Phil, but how's that working for you? But we do these things to each other. Actually, I'll share with you, several years ago, I was a young professor. And I had this older professor that I worked with. And I was kind of rambunctious and hyperactive then as well. And I would come up with these really great ideas, and I'd get really excited about them. And this older professor would say, well, who died and made you king? In kind of a sarcastic voice, he'd say it sometimes very sweet, well, who died and made you king? Well, who stepped down from the throne and made you king? And he would say that kind of sarcastically again and again and again. And I thought to myself, maybe he's just obsessed with kings, I don't know. But I said, what would a smart, intelligent, insightful professor do? I've got to do something different. Meeting after meeting after meeting. So actually, I'll share what I did is that I showed up at the next meeting with a new outfit. And so I remember that day really well. I came in a little bit late that day. I said, you'll never guess what happened. Somebody died. You never guess who they named king. I remember it very well because what I learned in that moment is that not all old professors have a good sense of humor. So but I kept my outfit. And actually, and I got news for you guys. If you guys get yourself one of these, and you wear it to work, they stop asking you to be on committees. So it's like, I think Dr. Birchak's overworked. I haven't been on a committee in years. So anyway, just one of those things. But actually, I've done a lot of done things in my life. That's one of them on top of that. But, you know, I also believe, though, too, that if you go through any day of your life and you haven't laughed about something, you're probably missing the point of life. And maybe not all of my humor is appropriate, and maybe not all professors appreciate it, but I do anyway. So that's okay. I love myself. You know, we have lots of challenges today, huge challenges in our lives. You know, when I mentioned this just a minute ago, diagnosis, we need it, but it's often misused because we'll label people. I think that's a huge, huge challenge. I think education is also a challenge because we'll hear people that have challenges, and then you'll hear people talk about that and say, you know, well, if we do it for that person, then we have to do it for everybody in the classroom. And you know what I like about Richard Lavoie says, you know what real fairness is that it's not about treating all people on earth the same way. It's not about treating all kids the same way. You know what fairness is it's giving people what they need. In other words, here's the example that Richard Lavoie gives. It's like, okay, if I come up upon an accident, okay, and there's somebody laying there and they say, oh my goodness, does somebody know CPR? And you say, yes, of course, I know CPR. Well, can you give him CPR? Well, no, I'm sorry, I can't give him CPR. Because, you know, if I give him CPR, I'm going to have to give everybody CPR, you know, and I just can't do that. And that's the way you know, my wife works, it's special education in Schenectady City Schools. And whenever people are talking about fairness, I can't give this kid this extra service, you know, whether he's hearing impaired or visually impaired or whatever, because that would be unfair. I would have to do that for everybody. She says, no, that is not what fairness is. Fairness is not about treating everybody the same. It's about giving people what they need. It's what they need. It's not treating everybody the same. So, and I think it's a huge challenge. And I also think technology is a huge challenge because it can be very distracting. I think technology can be a great organizer of information, but it's a horrible master. And after a while, sometimes we get very distracted by it. We get very addicted to it. I know students that can't get 20 minutes through a class without having to just... is something posted on Facebook, and so it becomes a huge distraction. And actually, some of the research is starting to say that if we're spending too much time, like the child, instead of teaching the child social skills, we hand them an iPad so that they'll be occupied. And what's happening is that we're costing ourselves relationships, we're costing ourselves social skills, we're costing ourselves the ability to have sustained concentration, which is one of the things that's happening too. So it's a two-edged sword. Technology is fantastic. I love technology. You can look up anything in the world within minutes, but at the same time, we have to be careful because it's a great servant and a horrible master. So when it starts to control our lives, we have to start to think differently about it. But there's three things I want to talk about today that I think are really, really, really important in terms of how do we build character, how do we really make an impact on people. It's three things: civility and conscience, and also learning collaboration. And when I say civility, the quote that I mentioned to you guys earlier, it's not fair to ask of others what you're not willing to do yourself. Civility is right at the top of the charts. And, we have to start to ask ourselves, what am I practicing? And the way that we start in our own lives is to ask ourselves, is this a crisis or is this an inconvenience? You know, there are real crises in this world. 9/11 was a real crisis. Hurricane Sandy was a real crisis. Having a loved one dying of cancer, that's a real crisis. That's a real crisis. Long lines at Dunkin' Donuts? Not a crisis! I can't find a parking place today? Not a crisis! Who left the dishes in the sink? Not a crisis! You ever know those people that have like 50 crises a day? All you got to do is ask them, how's your day? How was my day? You catch them about noon, and then they give you 13 things. First of all, the kids weren't up on time. And then the coffee broke, and I couldn't find a parking place. And then the traffic, And by the time they get to noon, they've had like 50 crises, folks. I've got news for you. If you have more than one crisis a month, you should probably reevaluate your life. There's a lot of inconveniences. And when I talk about this de-escalation, this ability to say, it's not a crisis, it's an inconvenience. There's a lot of inconveniences. We get ourselves so worked up over all of these things that are in our life. And so it starts with, what is it that you're practicing? And I'll tell you, here's how you do it too, is you start with the little things. If you already know that tomorrow you might get caught in a traffic jam, if you already know that tomorrow you might have a hard time finding a parking spot, if you already know that tomorrow the kids are going to track in the dog with muddy feet, and that those things could happen tomorrow, that's the place that we practice. And we practice it by taking a breath, taking a step backwards and saying, it's not a crisis, it's an inconvenience. There are real crises in this world, and there are a lot of inconvenience. And we start with what we practice, but we also go with self-discipline. I love the word discipline because it implies, it comes from the word disciple. I have a sister that calls me from California about her kids, because her kids are insane. She says, my kids they need more discipline. She's screaming over the phone, and it's like she wants a license to beat them. And it's like, discipline is a beautiful word, and what real discipline is it's self-discipline, teaching ourselves how to stop ourselves in those moments where we feel like reacting toward people. Because let's face it, guys, we're all getting a little bit afraid. I am. We don't know, read the paper tomorrow, who's the next person to become unhinged out there in the world. And what I say is that very often people will say, well, I'm not that crazy. I'm not that person who's a serial killer or going to go off on a mass shooting. I know. And on the insanity scale where people talk, well, but you know what? All those little things we do, everything from road rage to yelling at that clerk at the counter to being mean to other people, those little tiny things that we do, we're adding to it. We're adding to it. We're adding to it. Do we have any confessed road ragers in here? We got a couple of people. You know what the research suggests? About 5% of the population will admit it. And generally, when people do raise their hands, they go, yeah, I know, I should be working on it. But about 5% of the population admit it. But you know what the National Transportation Safety Board says? 50% of all people on the road, when confronted with aggression, they respond with aggression of their own. You ever one of those people that goes, oh yeah, buddy, you want to ride my bumper at 50 miles an hour? We're going to get you boxed in now. We can't go anywhere, can we? And what do you think, though, when we do that to people out there, that little passive-aggressive thing? Do you really think that guy's going to back off and go, maybe I've been a rude driver? Thank you for putting me in my place. I'll never do that again. No, every time we do that, we're escalating things in the world. And we have to ask ourselves, am I adding to it? Am I adding to it? And you're going to have to deal with a lot of miserable people. And when I say civility, it's just what we practice on a day-to-day basis. Because many of you are going to be asked to do the impossible. I get asked to do the impossible. And raise your hand if you've ever been asked to do the impossible. I get asked to do the impossible all the time. And here's a little tip for you guys. Instead of getting stressed out about it, you know what I do? I show up at my meetings. Instead of getting stressed out about it, somebody says, ask me an impossible task. I just show up with magic, Say, Dr. Bird, I need that on my desk by Friday. Consider it done. Just, if you use a little magic, it works really well. It's just one of those things. It's a little trick that kind of works for me. But anyway, we need civility, and it is about that self-respect, and just to be able to stop ourselves. As I've gotten older, I really think about a lot too, guys, is that, whatever got you to some level of success in your life, whether it's you have a job or you've got great aspirations, you've done wonderful things, and I'm assuming that just about everybody in this room has reached some level of achievement in their life, and that's a wonderful thing. And got you there? Willpower. But as I get older, I think I learn that maybe the most important things that I learn in life are not always the things that I take in, but the things that I let go of. The things that I let go of. I've got to learn to let go. And you know what? Willpower does get you a lot of things in life, but you know what brings you peace and happiness in relationships? Will, not power. And if we learn will, not power, to be able to say, no, I'm not going to lash out at that person. No, before I hit send on that email, I'm going to wait. There was a friend of mine that shared with me the 3 is-its. I love this. Is it true? Might be. Is it kind? As you're getting ready to send out that email. And number 3, is it necessary? And if they don't meet all 3, then maybe stop for a day and go, Maybe I won't send this out. Maybe I won't post this on Facebook. Maybe I won't put this up there. But it's about will, not power. It's will, not power that saves relationships. It's about not lashing out at our loved ones, stopping ourselves from saying something in the heat of the moment when we're angry. And what's interesting about all of this is that I go out to elementary schools and I talk to kids about like the steps for no name calling and why we stop ourselves, we don't call each other names. During the time I was doing an assembly for children, elementary school, 3rd and 4th graders, I come out and I find out that several of our top politicians in the country had posted all sorts of different name calling on different websites. And it's like, how am I supposed to teach children about no name calling and kindness and compassion when some of our movie stars, reality stars, musicians, and politicians are out there doing those kinds of things? And I know that sometimes it feels like we're not going to make a big difference, but believe me, it does. Those little things that we do with kids, it really does make a difference. But we need civility, and I love this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes in the world. John Wooden was one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. And he had this one, I've got this quote, a little thing right behind my door in my office at the College of St. Rose. I look at it every day. Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. It's one of my favorite quotes in the world. Look, I am 4'9" tall. You know what that means? I'm never going to dunk a basketball over LeBron James. I'm never going to hit a baseball out of Yankee Stadium. I'm never going to become a defensive lineman for the New York Giants. Maybe the Jets, not the Giants. But I'm just kidding. I love the Jets. Buffalo is what but anyway, but do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. If I stay focused on all the things that I can't do because I'm 4'9" tall, there's 1,000 things that I can't do, but I'll never get around to the 9,000 things that I can do. I had a son who was legally blind and he had epilepsy. And in an IEP meeting, when he was in middle school, the teacher said to him, "You're never going to graduate from high school." He not only got his Regents diploma, he got his bachelor's degree and his master's degree, because what in his mind, it was like, no, you're not going to tell me what I'm capable of, what I'm not capable of doing. Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. It's about taking the stuff that we can do. And eventually he went on to have training workshops with Apple, because he worked for Apple as a specialist for people with disabilities, visual and hearing disabilities. Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. There's lots of stuff we can't do, of course, but there's 9,000 things that I can do with myself. And my height has never stopped me from doing anything I want to do with my life, whether it was to be a teacher. I was a college wrestling coach for over 10 years. I've been a professor. I've written books, but my height has never stopped me. The stuff that I can't do has never stopped me. But we also need a conscience. We need civility, and we also need a conscience. When I say a conscience, it's about, I love this quote from Danny Thomas. He said, there's two kinds of, and many of you know Danny Thomas. He was a struggling actor, and he was very poor, and he said to himself, when he was very young, if I ever make it one day as an actor, I'm going to open up a hospital that's free for kids. And he started St. Jude's, and he said, but there are two kinds of people in this world, the givers and the takers. The takers eat better, but the givers sleep better. And that there's a lot of takers out there, and I get it, but don't let them jade you. Don't let them jade you. I say don't create your own poisons. There's an old saying that says, anger is like poisoning yourself and hoping the other person dies. And you think of miserable people, it's always like, I say, I can't wait till she gets fired. I can't wait till this. And it's like they're creating their own poisons. But we also have to stop the infectiousness of cruelty. And I love the quote from Leo Buscaglia. He says, to truly discover yourself, become selfless. And there's so many things that we can do in our lives to become selfless, to be able to, and I get this question all the time. Can you teach people to care? Yes, you give them someone to care about. And I guarantee you, everybody in here probably has a story about somebody that cared about them and made a huge difference in their life, made a huge difference in their lives. And I mentioned earlier, we got to let go of the need to be right, let go of the need to win, let go of the need to get even. It's having a conscience that sometimes small acts of compassion change us for the rest of our lives. But we got to let go. I keep wondering though too, so much hurrying. What are we in a hurry to? I don't know, I'm just in a hurry everywhere I go. It's like, I love when you line up at I love to go flying, and when you line up for like Southwest, they don't do it by assigned seats, but they do it by sections, like the A section, The B section, those with the C tickets. I always go on early and I get the A tickets, but I stepped up last year, my wife and I were flying, and I had an A ticket. They say, now boarding, those of you with a ticket A, 1 through 30. So I step up there and I go, this is the C group, right? This is the C group, right? And I was just standing and there was a woman about 5 people behind me. She was so upset that I would say, this is the A group. This is the A group. And now I can't even turn around. I've got my ticket and I'm thinking. She yells it 3 times. This is the A group. So finally my wife, this is a true story, she turns around, she says, please pardon my husband. He's a jackass. But anyway, true story actually. But it actually got better because the woman she says, don't worry, they'll catch him at the counter. It's like, we're going to catch the little man at the counter. But anyway, but I often have to be confronted with people, who really, they do that kind of pathetic, nobody appreciates anything. Nobody appreciates anything I do. Any of you have to work with those people? Nobody appreciates anything I do. I always keep this handy with me, so everywhere I go, I just keep them quick on the draw. Somebody pulls that, nobody appreciates me. So, hey, I do. And I just give them an applause, and I just carry them around. I keep my clappers with me everywhere. Good for you. So it's just an easy thing to do. Good for you. So actually, by accident, one day I was in the restroom and I'd set my clappers down. I wasn't having a good day, so I just looked in the mirror and go, Bert, you're okay. Nobody gonna love me? I'll love myself. So. But actually, I was speaking with a few people here in the audience before we got started, and they said, where I work, they're not that bad. If they're just a little bit, you can get the mini edition too, So, just one of those. They're easier to carry around too, so. But actually, I heard some people saying, no, the people I work with, they're if they're really, really, really bad, well, that's when I get out what I call my nuclear clappers. So So I usually use them in traffic. So I haven't been arrested yet, but anyway. So they're harder to carry around, but but anyway. See that, you guys didn't think you were going to learn anything here today, but anyway, we need civility and we need a conscience. And once we get civility and we really, really, really practice it, and we can calm ourselves, say it's not a crisis, it's an inconvenience. And once we develop our conscience, then we can move to that next level, which is the most important thing that we're possibly ever going to do in our lives, is to be a good collaborator. To be a good collaborator. To be a good collaborator, and what it starts with is that you've got to understand failure better than you understand success. I've often been announced as, Dr. Bird is a national college wrestling coach. Actually, I was. And I'm not saying that to brag, but when people will say, well, Dr. Bird, you must have been a great wrestler when you were a kid. No, I was not a very good wrestler as a kid. Even though I ended up in the top 10 in the country, and I was also a college wrestling coach for more than a decade. I was a horrible wrestler. In elementary school, I was the tiniest kid, and I couldn't play football or basketball, so I would go up to the YMCA, and I would wrestle. And I lost every single match in elementary school. I got to junior high school, I lost every match in 7th grade. I lost every match in 8th grade. I lost every match in 9th grade. I went to high school. The lowest weight was 98. I weighed 80. And I was so tiny, I had a perfect record as a sophomore. I made the team because nobody was in my weight, and I had a 0-17 record. But something really magical happened to me during that time, is that somebody came into my life while I was often getting in a lot of trouble. When I say seeing the best in others, instead of seeing the worst in others, there was a coach who didn't see me as a distractible kid who drove everybody nuts. He saw me as this wonderful, and he saw all the good things in me. He had this old school saying. He would say, Bertie, I'm just busting my buttons. I'm so proud of you. Because it's kind of an old school saying, I'm busting my buttons because I'm so proud. My chest is swelling, I'm busting my buttons. And he would often use that term. He'd say, Bertie, I'm just busting my buttons. Nobody works as hard as you. And so I would get pinned. I'd go out there and run some more sprints. I would do anything for this guy. But I never missed a class again. I never missed an assignment again because I never wanted to let him down. Now, finally, then, when I was a junior, I won the first match of my life. It took me all the way to my junior year of high school. And now I'm on a win streak. I got like 6 wins in a row. And I go to this tournament, and if I win the next match, I'm going to get up on the medal stand. I'm going to be up on the medal stand. Well, I'm so nervous, you know, when I go out there, and my coach going, Bertie, I just busted my buttons. I know you're going to win this. And he was so proud. I go out there, the guy gets a 10-0 lead on me. And now I'm so nervous, I look over, and coach is going, Bertie, you're going to win this match. I just busted my buttons. I know you're. And I was like, oh, God, I got to win it for coach now. But I start coming back on this kid, 10-4, 10-6. It was 10-7 with 10 seconds to go. And this kid is gassing. He's dead tired. I'm chasing him around the mat. I take him down out of bounds. It's 10-9 with 5 seconds left. And we come back to the center, and coach looks over and he goes, Bertie, I just busted my butt. I know you're going to win it. And he gives me the signal for this move called the suicide cradle, because you jump over the top, you have to lock around the leg and the head, and you roll through. It's a very dangerous move. And he gives me, so the whistle starts, I jump over the top, we're flipping and flailing, the whistle blows, the match is over. The referee stands up, goes 2 points, and at that moment I knew I was finally on the winner's stand. But you know what? You could have handed me Super Bowl trophy, World Series trophy. None of that would have mattered. All I wanted to do was to hear him say, Bertie, I just busted my butt. And he gradually starts shaking the daylights out of me. I'll share with you a true story that I went to one of my high school reunions. My buddy Bobby Loudon, who was captain of the wrestling team, he says, I will never forgive you for winning that match in the last second. I said, what? He said, I will never forgive you for that. And I said, why? He said, don't you remember? Coach brought all of the team over to the corner of the bleachers. It was a big tournament. And he said, he screamed at us for like 5 minutes. And he says, I had just lost a match. I was laying on the ground in front of the bleachers. And he kicked me for like 5 minutes. Did you see what Bertie did? I'm busting I'm so proud of Bertie. And he says he kicked me for 5 minutes while he's screaming at the team about how proud he was. And you know, in the grand scheme of things, you think, well, it's Jefferson County. It's some small wrestling tournament. But it was a pivotal moment in my life that's like, yes, all of my work is worth something. And there's somebody that saw that in me. Somebody that saw that in me. And you know, he followed me through my bachelor's degree when I almost flunked out. He followed me through my master's degree. I didn't know it, but my wife had invited him to the very formal hooding ceremony, you know, after the doctorate. And I come backstage, I've got on all of my, graduation regalia, and guess who's there? Bertie, I just busted my butt. And I feel like I'm 16 years old all over again. And years later, when I'm living in Latham, actually near here, and I get a card. My first book had come out. And I get a card from Lakewood, Colorado. I open it up. The first line is, Bertie, I'm just busting my buttons. I heard you wrote a book. I read it from cover to cover. I'm just busting my buttons. I'm so proud of you. And I'm over there reading this card, and I'm crying. My wife says, what's wrong? I said, he's still following me around. How does he even know? But I always thought, if I could be that person, for just one person in my life has meaning. And that's the goal about it. If you can be that person in somebody's life. And Coach had passed away a couple of years ago. I used to meet up with him every time. I would take him out to lunch. But it was the same thing. No matter how old I got, he would grab me, shake the daylights out of me, and go, Bertie, I just busted my butt. I'm so proud of you. And I always thought, if I could just be that person. And true collaboration is about being able to see the good things in people before we see the bad. Think of your best relationship in your life right now. Your best friend that you've had for 20 years, 10 years. The best friend you have in your life. You know what? I'll give you one quality of that relationship that you have with that person. They know all the bad stuff about you. And they've seen you at your worst. They've seen you when you're fussy and when you're crabby. And they still love you. They still love you. And isn't that nice? They still love you. Even though they've seen you at your worst, they still love you. And that's the mark of a great relationship. I talk about being distractible, which I am to this day. And I'm just so fortunate that I am married to someone who has all of this training in special education, my wife. And so she knows what to do with distractible kids. And she employs the same methods on me, So... It's true. Because you know what you do with distractible kids? You send them on missions. You keep them busy. Right? Distractible, and that's me. So we go out shopping, and my wife, she takes the big cart, because that's like the mothership. She won't let me have it, because she thinks I'll lose it or something. But she takes the big mothership, and then she hands me the basket. Okay, Bertie, go get us some bananas. Okay, bananas. Gonna go get bananas, And she sends me on missions. We were out shopping some time ago. I remember it very well, because she said, Bertie, go get some bananas. Okay, I'll go get some bananas. And I don't pay attention very well, but anyway, I get the bananas, and I spot my wife right next to our cart, red jacket, there she's standing, and I come over, and I put the bananas in the cart, and I pat her on the back. I said, honey, I'll meet you over at the deli. And I take a couple steps toward the deli, and I see my wife. in a red jacket, and I'm thinking either she's really fast or I just touched a stranger. And there's this poor woman in a red jacket, just like my wife. She's scurrying away with this cart, you know. God. So anyway, and of course, then my imagination goes crazy because I go, you know, I'm thinking that later on she's going to the security guards. And then the little man touched me. You find that little man out there. But anyway, so if you have distractible people in your life, you got to give them a break. And that's what collaboration is all about. But, you know, I know that you're going to have to deal with a lot of the aggression in the world, and I do too, you know. And that, of course, just, you know, even leaving here today, it's like I talk about things like road rage. I've got to deal with that too. You know, I'll be there in my Kia with my 2 pillows. People cut me off on the road. I shake my little fist at them. See how ineffective that is in dealing with aggression? Totally ineffective. That's why I always carry with me what I call my portable fist of rage. And so, where did you get your license? So, you know, and it actually keeps you safe because you can't text while you drive. But anyway, but I also want to let you know, I teach multicultural counseling. I would never, ever be biased against any of the females in here. So I have created the new ladies edition of the portable fist of rage. Can be angry and stylish at the same time. So anyway, I love this quote from Eric Fromm. He says, "Give that which is alive in you." You know why you're here at this conference today? Because something is alive in you. Something is alive in you. You know, when Eric Fromm said, "Give that which is alive in you." If nothing is alive in you, you have nothing to give. But we've got to give all of those things that are alive in us. And, you know, there was actually years ago, I tell you, I've got a skill that if this was an Olympic event, I would probably win a gold medal. But nobody can ride a shopping cart like I can. I jump on a shopping cart, man, I can ride it. But we were out shopping, and it was just a perfect day. A little bit of a downhill slant, shopping cart there, about half full. My wife always says, one of these days, you're going to roll that thing. And, you know, but anyway, I jump on a shopping cart, and I'm riding that thing across the parking lot as fast as I can. And I watch it, and I catch out of the corner of my eye, there's this young man about 16 years old. And he's got on one of those aprons, you know, he's collecting all the carts, and he's watching me. And he comes walking over to me, and I thought maybe I'll get a ticket for shopping cart riding or something. But he looks at me and he says, "Excuse me, sir." I said, "Yes." "How old are you?" It's a true story. The young man looks at me, he says, "How old are you?" And I said, well, at the time, I said, "I'm 55. And honest to goodness, I'm going to tell you what this young man said to me. He said, "Sir, I just hope that when I am your age, I'm having as much fun as you are." And it was so nice. And I said to him, I said, "I hope you are too. I hope you are too." Because, you know, when you look at kids today, you know, when they look at us adults, why would they want to grow up? You know, why would they want to become one of us? You ever have those people, like, you know, "Are you enjoying life?" "Yes, I'm enjoying life." Why don't you tell your face, you know? It's like, but we're free. All of us are free to choose our own attitudes. And, you know, I love this quote from Maya Angelou. She says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I've shown this picture up there before. I'll tell you, when I was in middle school years ago, I went to a very violent middle school, junior high school. And the first day I go there and a kid pulls a switchblade on another kid. We had gang fights. We had a lot of racial tension. It was just a lot. It was a very violent school. And I hardly knew anybody. And I'm walking down the hallway and people are calling me names because of my height. It was rough. I got picked on that day. But I went to my PE class and I sit down, alphabetical order. Baker, Berenson, Birchak. Bertie, I weighed like 40 pounds. Sitting next to me in 7th grade was Ricky the Bear Berenson. 6'3", 210 pounds, true story. You know, he was 210 pounds in 7th grade, 6'3", and he was solid. He was very solid. And he looks at me and goes, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Bertie." He said, "Nice to meet you. I'm the Bear." And he shakes my hand. Guess who became my best friend? The Bear. And don't mess with the bird because now you're going to get the bear. And so, but you'd see us walking down the hallway, the bird and the bear. But you know, one act of compassion, I never saw the bear get in a fight in his life. He had the ability to not care what anybody thought about him. He was the kindest, most gentle, and he was huge. He eventually played for UNLV, and he made it all the way to the Steelers. He was just this great big, but I never saw him get in a fight in his life. And he was so kind, and my wife kept telling me, she says, you ought to make that into a children's book, which I did, which just came out this month. But what I'm saying is that acts of compassion define us for life. That's those small acts of compassion that he gave to me stayed with me for the rest of my life. And those little things that you're doing for people out there, the advocacy, the kindness, the civility, having a conscience, those things change people's lives in small ways, little small ways. And last thing I'm just going to share as we go, because I know I'm a little behind. We got to go to our next workshop here. But you know, sometimes it's the smallest of things. I was out helping a middle school, and they were very concerned about the cyberbullying. And I met with a bunch of parents at this library one night, and there was this woman that was there, and she waited until everybody else left. And she was standing there with her purse, and she waited and she waited and she waited until everybody was gone. Then she came up to me and she said, Dr. Bird, thank you for coming to help out our middle school with this cyberbullying and stuff that's going on. And she said, but I just got to share with you something that really changed my life in my relationship with my daughter. And she said, you know, a couple years ago, my daughter was in your character education program. I had a bunch of students at the College of St. Rose. We'd go out to the school district and we would teach character ed week after week. And she said, but you know, my daughter was 5th grade. And we had this deal. Every Friday, we're going to clean out your backpack. She brings home her backpack, and we're cleaning it out. She says on this particular Friday, many of you know what backpacks look like after a week. There's dead fruit in there, and there's old milk cartons. But this piece of paper falls on the floor, this woman says, and across the top it says character ed. And this woman is telling me about that. She says, I asked my daughter, she said, what is this, honey? Oh, Mom, it's just that character ed. And she said, do you mind if I read it, honey? And her daughter says, no, Mom, you can read it. And so this woman's telling me the story. She puts down her purse and she reaches inside and she pulls out. She said, Dr. Bird, this was the assignment that week as we're cleaning out the backpack, is to write a paragraph about somebody who's a role model in your life. And she said, I'm going to read to you what my daughter wrote. And I remember it very well because I went and wrote it down right afterwards. She said, this is what my daughter wrote. The most important role model in my life is my mother. Because even when I make mistakes and do dumb things, she is still kind, compassionate, and she still loves me. If I could grow up to be like anyone in this world, it would be my mother. And this woman gets done reading it, and she starts crying. She's got me crying. We're standing in the library. And she says, in that moment, I realized what a huge impact I had on my daughter's life. And you know, whenever I'm getting fussy, I go lock myself in the bedroom. I pull that out. And she says, I could lose my car, my house. I could never lose this paper, Dr. Bird. She says, because it's a constant reminder of the power that I have in my daughter's life. And it's never left me. And you know, everybody in here is a power in somebody else's life. Everybody in here is, one way or another, whether it's with a coworker, whether it's with a family member, but we all have that power. And maybe the greatest reward we get in life, you know, is you might not even know about it one day, but down the line, somebody's asked about kindness or character and compassion, and the first person they think of is you. And there's nothing that's stopping any one of us from being that person in another person's life. And that's why we do what we do. Now, I'm going to be sticking around for a while, and I'll be out in the hallway, and I'll take all kinds of questions and whatever you guys want. And but I appreciate you guys being here today. And I actually brought some books with me, too. I don't sell them. I take donations because I support scholarships to the Epilepsy Foundation. And all of my proceeds from my books go to the Epilepsy Foundation for scholarships for students with epilepsy. And but I'll stick around. I'll be out in the hallway. And I just want to say to all of you guys, you're on a great mission in life. You're doing really, really, really good things. And I'm so proud of all the work you do. So please give yourselves a hand. Thank you very much. Thank you.